Hi, this is a video about why you should be using young adult tropes and cliches in your young adult fiction writing. I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube talking about the opposite, which is a lot of YouTubers or booktubers or book bloggers are complaining about the things that happen in all young adult fiction over and over again. It gets really annoying, especially when it's so expected and so obvious, because you don't read young adult books to hear the same things all over again. It always has to be a new story, new characters, new setting, something so that you're not just reading a book you've already read. And that's really important. That's what the author needs to give in the writing experience. However, readers like a particular genre because they expect certain things to happen. And when you start messing around with what you consider cliches of a genre, like it's being done too much, it's been overdone, it's in every young adult book, especially if it's being done in every best-selling young adult book, those are the things that you want to make sure you have in your fiction, not the things that you want to start stripping out. Because once you strip out those things, you get to a point where suddenly it's a very different thing than the books that are selling. And so you're trying to convince your readers to read this thing that's different from the books that they like, that they're accustomed to. So instead of avoiding cliches and tropes, what you really need to do, write them down and find them, but then over-deliver. Find a way to transcend the trope and the cliche so that you're putting it there, but you're doing it differently and better than any other author has done before. So they can see it and they can say, I like how they twisted this into something new because it's been overdone, but if I totally took it out, it might not be that effective either. When we talk about cliches, there's a couple that I wrote down that I heard being referred to the most often, and so I'll mention a few of them. Missing parents is a big one. Most young adult fiction, the kids are kind of left on their own. The parents aren't around very much. However, most of the time, the real issue is that a lot of young adult fiction is based on a hero's journey. So you have your protagonist being kind of a nerdy geek, shy, unpopular at the beginning, and turning them into this amazing, supernatural, powerful hero, confident warrior at the end of the book or the series. And if you're following the hero's journey, most heroes in the hero's journey start off as orphans. That's kind of the way that it works, because most of the time they're going to find out later that their parents were actually someone really special, maybe a king or a queen, or someone very talented, or they had supernatural abilities. So they're going to be discovering and adjusting their relationship and their beliefs about their parents as the plot thickens. And so you don't want to if you just show up and their parents are there and they're just there through the whole thing, that takes away a really powerful plot device because you won't be able to do any of those things later in the book unless you find out that they're not the real parents. You can have adult people in the plot that the protagonists relate to, that they get advice from. They should be there anyway because there should be some adults that act as antagonists, because in most young adult fiction, the adults are kind of the... I read this quote somewhere that was awesome. It was something like, young adults are the water and adults are the shore. So the teenagers are always crashing into the limitations and restrictions set upon them by an adult society. And so that's part of what they're trying to transcend. They build the powers, the self-belief to overthrow the adults and structure a new, better society for themselves. That's an important part of young adult fiction. And so you want to have some antagonists and you want to have some helpful adult figures. The problem is you can't have the adult figures in your story actually solve the problems or do any of the action, because then the hero of the story becomes the adult and not the teen protagonist who's actually trying to get through all of this stuff. The hero has to be the protagonist. So you can't have adults that are competent or capable enough to just fix the problems. And that's why a lot of the times the young adult teens won't tell the adults what's going on. They won't tell their parents, which is kind of dumb because their parents could probably just fix it and they wouldn't get into all this trouble, but then you wouldn't have a story. So that's part of the reason it's not exactly a cliche. It's sort of got to be there to make a strong young adult novel. Another one is the description of the main character, which is almost always petite, brunette, clumsy, shy, but beautiful and doesn't know it. So and also they usually are brunette and have green eyes often, or they're redhead with green eyes, which is overdone and kind of annoys me as well. Those are the kind of things you want to watch out for. The reason that they work is that you basically want your reader to visualize themselves as the main character, as the hero of your book. We read for escapism. We want a hero or a heroine that's close enough to us that we can kind of get into the story and feel like this person represents me and they're living out my dream world. And I'll bet if you did a study, the vast majority of readers of young adult fiction would be shy brunettes, maybe who aren't petite but want to be petite or are body conscious. They may want attention from boys but think that they're not beautiful enough to get it, but they'd like to be beautiful. I mean, generally, like when you write in a heroine for a character, you're building a dream world for your readers. And if the majority of readers of young adult fiction are white and brunette and female, and I think they probably are, although I don't have statistics, but I'll bet that's probably a common guess. It doesn't mean you can't write minority literature. It doesn't mean you can't take a risk and do something totally different, but you'll probably sell more copies if there are more people who can identify with your main protagonist. Doesn't mean you have to do that, but if you want to be best-selling, sell a ton of copies, you want to craft a protagonist that embodies the majority of your target readers. So you should know about that. You should know who you're writing for. You should give them a protagonist they can identify with. But that's the reason that a lot of young adult protagonists are kind of all the same. I'll bet it's a reflection of the readers. The other one is gazing into eyes. You always describe especially the romantic interest, the hot guys, as having amazing, powerful, beautiful eyes and staring into each other's eyes, and there's an attraction. It's kind of overdone. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but don't do it so obviously and don't spend so much time. Don't spend a page describing their beautiful appearance and their eye color and how captivating they are. What I've seen a lot of people do, which I thought it was just kind of lazy writing, was they would say, he looks like a model in a underwear catalog, or he looks like someone on the cover of an Abercrombie and Fitch advertisement, or something that gives them the idea he's really hot, he looks like a model, without going into all that description. Really, you could just maybe give his eye color and the color of his hair and the cut of his hair. Is it short or long? There's almost always one guy with short blonde hair and one guy with long brown hair, one with blue, one with green eyes, contrasting. You basically pick the two types of hot guys you like and put them both in, which brings to the next one, the love triangle. People are down on love triangles. The reason I think that they work is if you're just writing a romance, there's enough. There's one attraction. There's one story between the guy and the girl, and they can't work out their shit, but finally they get through it all and they're together. That's a romance plot line. That's fine. For most young adult, you're not really writing romance. You're writing a plot with action that happens, and you need to throw in more conflict into the plot to make it more dramatic. You need to add more conflict. That's easier to do when you're putting in the situation where you have two different attractions or you have two different guys. It's not actually that uncommon. It's very common in your life to not be sure who likes you and not be sure who you're interested in. You might find them both attractive in different ways. You might feel like you have to make a choice or they're putting pressure on you to make a choice. That's a really normal teen and human experience. And it's great for dramatic fiction because then you can put on all of these little tense scenes with jealousy and fighting. It doesn't mean they have to get into an actual fist fight, but there can be tension and drama even in the things they're not saying to each other, just because of this little uncertainty about who likes who and why they can be together, they can't be together, or what other kind of conflicts you have. It also is really great if you can, like a normal romance, you would have built-in conflict into their roles. So you'd have the, the butcher and the vegetarian or something where their beliefs about who they are and what they want out of life and what they have to do to get what they want are at odds with each other, but they still are attracted to each other. That's a normal romance plot, but if you can do that two ways and have three people who are trying to figure everything out, or normally the girl is in the middle of these two possibly warring nations or communities, it adds a lot of dramatic tension. What it doesn't work very well if you do a love triangle is just to give two options and not really develop them and make it clear who's going to be with who in the end. What you want to do with a love triangle is not really focus on the romance, but just add three different characters who are all worth your time and the reader's time, and you develop them really well, and part of the story is them figuring out what to do with each other, or are they friends, are they lovers? There could be a kissing one, kissing the other type of thing going on. I don't like young adult books that focus too heavily on the romantic drama, because I think it's sort of silly when people just get all upset about each other romantically. It's fine if that's the plot, if it's a romance, but if you're writing young adult fiction, there's probably a lot more important things going on. The world is probably ending. People are dying. So when they're getting in little fights or jealousy rages or public arguments about their feelings, that seems really immature. It's okay in the beginning of a first book if your character is really immature and you're stressing that, but as the plot goes on, hopefully they'll learn enough to become more mature and say something like, I've got to save the world and not worry about my heart or my love interest. That's also the kind of built-in self-sacrifice that you're going to want to get to by the end of the first book of the first series, which is you really hit what the young adult protagonist wants. Often it's maybe their life goal, or shit happens and they're trying to get back to their original dream or their original goal. Maybe they want to go to college, maybe they want to be a doctor. Something knocks them off that path. In the beginning, they try to get back there, but something else happens that makes them finally give up their primary dream and say, I can't do that anymore. I give up my selfish motivation, my personal motivation. I have to think about everybody else or the world or the community or the people I love. They have to sacrifice something to become that champion hero who battles the villain in the final scene and defeats the enemy. That's something you're going to want to put in. I'm going to stop this video here. Those are just some of my thoughts, but the main idea, and I talk about this with book covers a lot too, is that you don't want to avoid book cover cliches. You don't want to make a book cover that's totally different from all the other books in your genre that are selling really well, because readers won't know when they're looking at the cover what kind of book it is or whether they should be interested in it, because they can't just look at it and see, oh, this looks like a young adult best-selling fantasy. I'm going to buy it because it's the type of book that I like to read. You want to have that really clear on the cover. If you're writing a young adult urban fantasy or romantic paranormal romance or anything, if you're writing that kind of book, there are things that should be built into that kind of book. It's the same with all genres except literary fiction. With literary fiction, you're trying to do something new and different. But those are really hard to sell, and my guess is you're not writing literary fiction. Even in young adult, literary fiction doesn't sell very well. If you're writing young adult, you'll do much better to write popular young adult fiction. This is true for any fiction. It's easier to write popular fiction, and if you're writing popular fiction, you need to look at the cliches and you need to put them in your book, but make them better than anybody else has done. You can't just say, I'm going to avoid every cliche that's ever been done and make something totally new, because it won't be as successful. It doesn't mean it's not as good of a book. If that's what you want to do for a personal hobby, for a personal challenge, that's fine. But you're going to spend a lot of time writing your book. It's a ton of effort. It's a ton of work. I would recommend writing books that hit all those buttons to satisfy readers first, so that you build a platform and you sell some books and you get some fans. People might say it's formulaic or it's all a cliche. Some people might not like it because they're looking for something better. but a lot of people are going to like it. If you hit those buttons and you tell a story that's basically the same as all the other young adult, and you'll notice this if you read any young adult, like best-selling young adult fiction, mainstream published best-selling young adult fiction, they do all this stuff over and over again, cliched stuff. It's the same storyline. They hit all the same buttons. There are twists, and it's a little bit different. There's new characters, but there are very few best-selling young adult mainstream published books that avoid cliches and are totally new and totally different. They're there because they work and they sell really well, and publishers know that, and publishers are in the business of publishing books that make money. That's different from the majority of self-publishing or indie authors who are writing books and they want to make money, but they're not writing books to make money. And that's a really fascinating distinction if you want to write books to make money, and I really think you should focus on that. What you're really just doing is writing books that satisfy readers. So when you say, I'm not interested in writing a book to make money, or I don't care about the money, or I don't care about success, I just want to write a good book, in your head, in your imagination, writing a good book is better than writing a book that satisfies readers. And I think that's really dangerous territory, because it means you don't care about reader satisfaction. You don't care if readers are enjoying your book. If that's the case, you don't deserve success for your book. It's fine if you want to write it, but you don't deserve success. When you go out and try to promote it and market it to people and get people to buy it, you can't say, I didn't write this book for you. I don't think you're going to enjoy it, but please buy it anyway. That's terrible, and you shouldn't expect anybody to support you. If you're writing books that readers are going to love, that means you know what are in the realm of possibility for the best-selling books of that genre. You make sure you write down a list of those cliches or those tropes that are generally found in most young adult fiction, and you find a way to put them in your book but transcend them to make them there but not obvious and better than people have done. But you don't want to just avoid them all and write something else, because then you're not writing popular best-selling young adult fiction. You're writing maybe something artsy that you think is a good idea, but you're going to have to convince and educate readers to buy your book. You're going to have to convince them. It's a tougher sale. It's hard enough being a writer. It's hard enough writing books and building a platform and selling books. You don't need to start off by writing your first books and making them artsy, because that's going to be much harder to build a platform and sell books. It's much easier to start off with your cliched popular fiction that satisfies readers' expectations, even if you don't consider it art, even if you consider it like, this was too easy. All I did was take this list of things that are commonly found in young adult fiction, and I did all those things. If you do those things and you do them well, and you write okay, and your story is okay, that'll be a successful book. If you have a good cover on it, you do a little bit of marketing, if it hits those buttons for readers, it'll be successful. It'll make money. You'll build a platform. Later, you can start writing books that you think are more interesting, that are less obvious, that took a little more work, that aren't as cliched or templated, but you probably won't sell as many copies of that book. You can do it if you want to, if you feel like you need to challenge yourself. I personally, if I'm going to spend a lot of time writing, I write for readers. I want them to be very happy with the writing. I want to satisfy them with the writing. I do that by finding out what's common for best-selling books, because the best way to tell you what will be popular or what will sell really well is to go in the young adult book section of Amazon, scroll through the top 100 best-selling books, indie and traditionally published, see what people are buying, see what they're liking, see what the normal young adult buying public, the people who are actually buying and reading the books, see what they're paying for, because what they're paying for, that's what they value, that's what they want more of. You need to, if you want to be a career young adult author and make money as a young adult author, you need to be finding out what they like, what they're paying for, what they're buying, what they're voting for. Find those things. Find those 100 best-selling young adult books and write another book that has a lot in common with them, that really feels like it fits in with those top 100 best-selling books. It does all the same